Rod Spearman. Once again, I want to welcome everyone to Spearman Consultants webinar. This webinar this time is centered around individuals and parents and people that have family members with disabilities. I've invited Bill Webb, who is a longtime friend and who has been in the social service and health service and disability service for a lot of years. Bill is going to be our presenter. He's with Community Access Unlimited, one of the largest organizations in the state of New Jersey that deals with and address the needs for individuals and family members with members of disabilities. So I'm going to open with, as I normally would, word of prayer, then I'm going to turn it over to Bill. Gracious Lord, we ask that what we are presenting will touch each individual hearts and minds, and that it will be a blessing of education and spiritual uplifting and strength to those that are listening. And so thank you. With this, Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you once again for everyone that's come on board to hear about disabilities. I think it's, once again, before Bill's, I think it's a topic, an issue that is not shared collectively all over. And there's so many individuals or families and people that are struggling with members of disability and don't know how to get help and how to handle it. So once again, Bill Webb, you have it. Thank you so much. I'm going to mute.
Rod, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the webinar and serve as a facilitator / information provider. I do work at Community Access Unlimited in Elizabeth as a community engagement consultant and a staff trainer. I'll just make a quick statement about community access. We'll talk about it more at the end. Community Access, as Rod mentioned, is a large social service agency that's devoted to helping people with developmental disabilities. We serve primarily adults, but we have a growing program that serves children and youth as well. Community Access provides residential programs and community support programs, and underneath those two kind of umbrellas, there's a wide range of services that are offered to people with disabilities and their families. So we'll mention it again towards the end. My intention with the webinar is to provide some overview information for you. Many of you may be very well acquainted with the disabilities world, and then also hopefully to stimulate some discussion where people can bring questions up, maybe offer advice or experiences, or maybe suggest resources that would be helpful to other people. So it's kind of a dual focus, if you don't mind. A disclaimer for me, although I am a parent, I am not a parent of a child with disabilities. So there's a lot of lived experience I have not had that some, perhaps many of you have had. And I welcome that and really honor it, because I think that parenting in any circumstance is a very heavy responsibility, especially in this day and age. It gets more and more complicated, all the issues that parents have to deal with their children. And it's especially so for parents who have children with disabilities. There's the entire lifetime of responsibility that is additional, and we'll get into that in just a moment. So I appreciate the support and suggestions I've gotten from several colleagues and friends who do have children with disabilities, and so I've drawn on some of their experience, as well as doing some research on it in terms of service systems. So let's let me just invite you, if you're interested, to put any questions or information that you may want to share in the chat. And so we can kind of pick up on that as we go along. And Maria, are you able to share the screen? Thank you very much. I do want to also, Rod, thank you and Spearman Consulting for hosting this webinar, and want to call out the Union County Fatherhood Initiative Coalition for being a wonderful supportive organization for men and fathers in the community, including those who have children with disabilities. And I do want to give a shout out to Teen Lancers as well, Rhea and Angela, for their technical support and planning and making what otherwise would be a very drab typed presentation into a more lively graphic one. So I hope you enjoy their artwork as well. Next slide, please. Now, again, if those of you who are on already have experience as parents with a child with disabilities, then this quote that's up here may ring true for you, or it may not, depending on your experience. But it is from a parent of a child with disabilities, complex neurodevelopmental disabilities, with special medical problems. And she's outlining in this happened to be a mother, I believe, the challenges of bearing a child who turns out to have disabilities, and you didn't expect that. So you go quickly from the dreams of the mythical perfect child to a child who may challenge you in terms of their medical needs and their needs for special care and services. And having that child does impose more responsibilities on you for care. You may be so absorbed with the care of a child, especially in the earlier years, that you lose connections with friends and family members because you're just totally absorbed. It may affect your ability to do your job the way you're used to doing it because of all of the multiple appointments and responsibilities you have. And sometimes it can be a very great challenge on your family. Next slide, please. Before we dive back into the family one, this is the journey we're going to try to go on together here. That's the numbers of the slides. So the first one is going to be a discussion of acceptance, the early experience that you've had or may have with a child with disabilities, and how you've handled that, how you've come to accept your child and your child's special needs. Then we'll talk about family adjustments, school adjustments and advocacy, planning and transition, support, self-care, and work-life balance, tips for fathers, and lastly, we'll go over some resources. Next slide, please. I would like to add that in the process of just doing some research for this, it gave me a taste of just how broad and deep the world of disabilities is. There are a multitude of services out there covering many different kinds of disabilities and many different levels of services. And I think in this short time that we have this evening on the webinar, the best we'll be able to do is hit the top of the waves, basically. It's going to be a lot we're not going to have time to cover. But let's talk a little bit about your early experience of having a child with disabilities. There's obviously a wide range of disabilities, from ones that are less or more challenging. They may be social impairment disabilities. They may be mobility impairment disabilities. They may be learning disabilities. They may be physical, medical, and mental health disabilities all rolled up into one. So in the early stages of having a child, it's not uncommon for families or parents to have very conflicting feelings. On the positive side, hopes, dreams, and joys, as well as denial, frustration, disappointment, fears, maybe even anger, maybe even guilt. There's a whole range of emotions that having a child brings to any family, and I think they're magnified if you have a child with developmental or other kinds of disabilities. So a question I just would like to throw out here and invite anyone, if you'd like to comment on it, is, how did you process the news of your child's condition in your own self? How did you communicate and process with your spouse and your kids and your families and friends? I just invite, if anybody wants to, speak up on that while we're talking, that is absolutely fine. If you don't want to, that's also absolutely fine. So I'll just throw these out here maybe as questions to consider. The early days and months of adjustment can be very challenging. Your life has been upended by a myriad of extra needs that you had not anticipated, perhaps, during the pregnancy, and you're going to be full of a lot of surprises in the early stages. You also can have lots of joys welcoming a child with disabilities. Every child, regardless of ability or disability condition, is a wonderfully unique human being with all kinds of potentials and all kinds of love and joy to be expressed during the course of the life. So it's a mixed bag, I would assume. A question I would have for you to consider is, at what point did you arrive? How long did it take to arrive at a place of acceptance where you weren't maybe quite so in the state of shock or surprise, and you weren't in quite so overwhelmed perhaps by the news of this? When did you get to a place where you realized, hey, we're in this for the long haul? We have a lifetime ahead of rewards and joys and adventures and frustrations and challenges. Okay, next slide. So, thinking of the parenting role, it's parenting plus actually is probably a mild term. I would say parenting exponentially in terms of the responsibilities that parents have to take on. It's really critical because the statistics for marriage stability for families with disabilities is kind of discouraging, depending on the situation that people encounter and the strength of the marriage and how people work out responsibilities and roles. There are extra stresses and extra strains on the parents in a family with a child with disabilities. And if you don't pay attention to your own needs and the needs of your married relationship, and if you don't pay attention to coming up with a clear communicated division of responsibilities, you may be in for a rough ride. Something over 80% of families, end in divorce. Or I shouldn't say end. A family never ends, but the marriage may end in divorce. And with that as a backdrop, it just underscores the critical importance of self-care and care for your partner or your spouse. So also, if you already have children in the family and this is your first child with a disabling condition, you have other children who are not disabled, how's that adjustment going? So much attention has to go by necessity to your new child that your other kids could feel, disappointed, discounted, left out a little bit. So it's really important that if you can, prepare them ahead of time. If you know what the conditions are that you will likely be encountering, prepare them ahead of time with as much education as you can about the nature of the disabilities that your child has, and certainly prepare yourself. Educate yourself about the medical needs, the physical needs, the social needs, educational needs that may come up for your child. And it's easy for each parent, I think, to feel isolated in their own sense of overwhelmedness. Similarly, it's easy for a married couple or a partnership to feel isolated inside their family from other people in the community, especially in the early stages. If you don't have a supportive extended family, and you don't have maybe a close network of friends who you've kind of brought along on this journey, it's really important for your own mental health and your own stability to have supports to bring your extended family and to help your kids be wonderful siblings with their new brother or sister, and to treat people as equally as you can, knowing that each child needs something different. So again, I invite you to just consider, how your interactions have been with extended family, friends, and community. And if anybody wants to comment on that, feel free to do so. We will, of course, have time at the end of the webinar for discussion and questions and answers. Okay, next slide, please. Before we dive into school adjustments, just a brief fact that about 20% of all U.S. kids or children under the age of 18 have some kind of disabling condition, whether it's chronic physical, developmental, behavioral, and/or mental health condition. So it's 1 in 5 children does come into this world or develop soon after a disabling condition or more, multiple ones. And of those 20% of the kids, 65% of those will have a need for additional support services, accommodations, modifications, in addition to the specific needs of their particular disability. So school years are critical, obviously, as a child gets ready to leave the daily nest of being at home in a family, and for the first time, perhaps meet up with peers and teachers in a school. That can be a very challenging experience. And again, depending on the level of needs that your child has, it's obviously really important to meet teachers ahead of time, to see what the school learning environment is like, what the physical presentation of the school and the classroom is, and obviously to discuss ahead of time what special arrangements you may have to make for your child with the teacher, with other students in the classroom, and with other possible physical accommodations in there. Every child is entitled to free public school services under Section 504 of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the way that gets created is through an individualized education program. Parents are very much a part of that, the formulation of that program, along with the educational staff and if there are guidance counselors in school, that kind of thing. So that program will identify the specifics of your child's needs and what specific accommodations and modifications may need to be made in order for your child to have an equal, at least an equal opportunity experience in terms of educational services and development while they're in school. It's critical, obviously, a child's relationship with peers is extremely important. Learning to make friends, to have people to talk to and play with is a critical part of socialization. And socialization may or may not be a part of the challenge with your particular child. Some children mix and mingle very easily, others do not. And it's important that your child have access both to social supports and educational supports to help them with that adjustment to school. One potential issue for children with disabilities is the possibility of being made fun of or excluded from social activities, or being made to feel less than, like maybe because they have a certain condition, teacher wouldn't think that they could do an activity that other kids are doing. That alone and by itself could lead to the child to feel different, outside the circle of friendship, if you will, and a little bit vulnerable. So how your child's treated by the teacher and other staff members at the school, and how your child is treated by his or her peers, is a critical part of their early socialization and experience. And again, Well, you have to take the risk, as every parent does, of having your child leave your home and go to school. It's part of the normal developmental stages of life. So again, a question I would ask those of you on the webinar, if you've had experiences with schools, what have they been like? Have you been able to get the input that you need with teachers and the educational system for your child's IEP? And have you been able to have successful child interaction with peers? Let me just stop at that point and see if anyone has questions or wants to share anything. Okay, if not, let's go on. So as your child goes through the school system, that IEP may need to be adjusted frequently, or maybe not every semester or something, but it certainly has to be adjusted every year. As your child's needs change and the services available change, then you and the teachers, the educational staff, need to make changes in the IEP to make sure that your child has a solid educational experience and social experience in school. I want to just refer to a couple of notes here that are not on the screen. There are early intervention and early intervention services through the special education division of the Department of Education that can help your child, as well as the special needs services in the school itself. So you may want to look into that. To repeat, the rights of individuals with disabilities and their families in federally funded programs and activities are protected in all public school districts. In order to qualify for Section 504, which is the section of the Rehabilitation Act that funds services for children with disabilities, the child's conditions must limit at least one major life function. And that can be anything from walking to speaking to hearing to social interaction to other physical conditions. Physical or mental impairment limits activities, and it may interfere with basic manual tasks. I see a question popping up there in the chat. Hang on one second while I take a look. Oh, thank you, Daryl, for your question. And Walter, thank you for your question as well. So the question came up, what are some of the more common special needs conditions that schools see these days? Well, I think ADHD is still, pretty prevalent. Autism spectrum disorder, mental health issues, certainly. ADD issues and a variety of other disabilities. So there's probably 20 or so different conditions that schools see. Those are that I just mentioned, maybe some of the more common ones. And Walter, I see your question. Future planning is critical. Schools are notoriously bad at post-graduation planning, despite their legal mandate for transition planning. And you're absolutely right. New Jersey has so many school districts. It's mind-boggling. And 626, you've got the count correct. So depending on what school district you're in, you really will have to advocate for your child to make sure that your child's needs are being addressed in that school district, and that whatever accommodations or modifications are necessary are provided.
Bill, I would invite Walter to just share some thoughts because we
Yeah,
know he's been very
yeah.
involved with it.
Walter, feel free to jump in, please.
Please.
Well, thank you. I'll certainly do that as we go along. But I don't want to interrupt your agenda. So
I'm happy to have your input anytime.
yeah, all right. I think those are the critical points that I was making, though, that with school districts are notoriously bad at this. There are some that are good, but the majority are not. And so, even though your child may be very young, at the time you determine that there is what will probably be a lifelong developmental disability, you need to be thinking about what happens after age 21. The age 21 falling off the cliff effect, as it's often known, is a very dramatic problem within our system. And so starting to think about that transition planning, even though schools are mandated to do it from the age of 14, you need to be doing it on your own because there's no one better than the parent as the first advocate.
Thank you for that, Walter. Yeah, I mean, you guys, meaning you parents, are the experts. The schools are there to help meet your needs, but no one knows your child like you do, and so it's critical that you advocate as much as possible for for the services that your child needs. School districts are obliged to provide the services, and even if it requires them, bringing in additional specialists in or arranging for other activities, educational activities to supplement what they get in school. It's an obligation of the school. Let's see. Well, let's, Daryl, I'm going to come back to your question in a little bit on the other kinds of disabilities that school systems see. I want to just reference some notes on that, but I don't want to hold us up. Does anyone have any other questions about the school adjustment issues?
Hi,
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Daryl. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Daryl.
Yeah, I just went to a conference recently here in Maryland, and surprisingly, there's a lot of talk about all of the mental health issues, ADHD, depression, anxiety that's taking place in our schools, and how kids getting the treatment is very difficult and more. Are you aware of any programs now where they're bringing more of these mental health services into the schools?
Into the schools, I don't have an answer to that. I do know in New Jersey that there is a children's system of care under the Department of Children and Families, and that system of care is a network of services, including mental health, that can be accessed through like a managed care portal that's called Perform Care. So they serve as kind of the gatekeeper for mental health services and other kinds of more concrete services that kids may need. But to address the mental health part, generally, I mean, there's a couple ways that kids could get access. I guess in New Jersey, there's a mobile response team. The local care management organization also has maintains a list of local community resources, including mental health services, and they will try to work with you as your advocate to help arrange for services for the child who needs mental health services. There are many providers. If I just take Union County as an example, many mental health providers in Union County. Not all of them are equally equipped, perhaps, to address a child with developmental disabilities who also has mental health issues. They may be able to address the mental health part, but they may not know the nuances of the combination of just developmental disabilities and mental health. Also, there is I'm not sure if this is answering your question. I'm giving it a try. There's also typically waiting lists. There's not enough mental health services. I know New Jersey is going to be funding more services going forward. I think through the schools, there's an NJ4 program that's pretty new that is intending to have mental health services in the schools. So I believe it's still in the very early stages of implementation, but the aim of that program is to have therapeutic staff on hand so that kids can access them directly in the schools, in addition to what's offered in the community.
Yeah, and I think I chose my words a little poorly. What I was really trying to say is, for proximity purposes, trying to have capable services, because the other challenge is getting individuals to the care they need versus the care coming to them much easier, as the schools being almost like a facility on the weekends or after hours to provide those services.
Yeah, I mean, I think I believe that's going to expand in New Jersey with this NJ4 program. But I don't know all the details of it currently. But certainly, if the schools do have, here's Walter. Come on up, Walter.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The governor signed an agreement to begin to resume a project that had been done in the schools in the past to enhance mental health services, and it's been reinitiated as of August of this year as a pilot in 50 school districts around the state. And so that goal was to test that out over the course of this year and then expand it beyond that. So where it's going to go beyond that will certainly depend on the legislature funding. But they did try to reintroduce the idea that it had been done in select schools around the state and that they were trying to figure out a way to expand that. So that project just began in August of this year. So it's still in its early stages.
Thank you for that clarification, Walter. I appreciate that. And Daryl, just to respond a little bit more, conditions like depression and anxiety, which everyone knows is greatly mushroomed and surfaced as a major need since COVID, if not before. There's a great concern about suicidal attempts and suicide that happens in schools more, or happens with school age kids more frequently. So some of these services, I think, are designed to put a floor underneath kids who are experiencing depression and anxiety and other kind of mental health conditions. But they're also there, I think, to help prevent kids from, going too far down a path where they would actually consider ending their life. So it has kind of a dual function, I think, of restoring health and also preventing death, if you will. And Daryl, thank you very much for your question. I appreciate that. Anyone else have anything else on mental health or schools at the moment? So let's get back to this slide here for a moment. Planning and transition. And as your child gets to the age of 18 and is either going to graduate or maybe not, maybe will leave school or graduate, there's a kind of a gap of between 18 and 21 where services are still, I think, obligated through the school system, and then we're kind of in between the DDS and the adult disabilities system for kids, and there are a couple of channels that your child can benefit from services. There's a supports program and a community waiver program through the the adult disability services system that your child may be eligible for. And in that case, there would be an ISP. The IEP educational program pertains to the schools. The ISP, which is individual supports program, is the overall, thank you, John, very much for your participation. The ISP individual support program is for adult planning, for planning for further education, vocational training, employment, housing options, other kinds of services, specialized services that may be out there. So that's another step that you need to plan for as your child goes through the school years and gets towards graduation. And you really, as I think Walter already indicated, you really need to be sure to start that process at age 14 or no later than 16. Walter schooled me on the importance of self-advocacy. If your child is going to have an independent life, especially, or even if they're going to have a quasi-independent life, they have to learn the skills of self-advocacy, and they have to have the sense of self-esteem that is the foundation for feeling you deserve to advocate for yourself. So it's really important. Okay, hang on, Rod. I'll get there. So it's really important that you teach your kids to self-advocate. Let me go to Rod's question here. Adults that need support. Are you talking about the parents, Rod, or adult?
I'm talking about the adults that have been raised in a household and now they're adults and they need support, or parents that have adult family members.
Sure. Yeah. No. There's there's the option for supports and community waiver services to be, or I should say, community waiver services to be provided. There's a whole range of things that can be provided to people living at home, including mentoring, respite care, job coaching, recreation activities, socialization activities. Any of the activities of life that one would be able to access if they did not have disabilities can be provided under community supports for people living at home. And kind of while we're on that, thinking ahead for housing resources, you do have to make some decision about whether your child's going to live at home with you, permanently, your adult child, or whether they are going to live independently. In which case you have a number of options you could pursue, or whether you want to access organizations or programs in the community that do offer residential services, such as group homes or supervised apartments or semi-independent living situations where they're not at home, but they're not fully independent either. So there are a lot of options there. And then we'll talk about a resource at the end that you can access for that. Financial planning, obviously, is a big part of your life with your child with disabilities. And there are a number of vehicles you can use to try to develop financial plans for and with your child. There is a special needs trust system that's available through the state and also ABLE accounts. You can do planning in a will that includes your child and whatever provisions you want to make. You can seek guardianship or power of attorney. You can create I guess extra savings if you're able to do that. And that may be challenging because maybe it'll pop up in the chat here. One of our participants is suggesting the parents should contact DDD for support services, housing, etc. Yeah, we're going to get right into that in just a minute, actually. So before we jump into resources, let me just go to the next slide for a minute, please. So when we developed this webinar, the thought was primarily for fathers because of the Union County Fatherhood Initiative Coalition, but obviously we are including parents, whether they're fathers or mothers, in this situation. So this is back to the idea that the challenge of providing a life and opportunities for your child with disabilities can be quite daunting and quite absorbing. And it is really, really critical that parents do pursue self-care and not think of it as a selfish act at all. Think of it as an absolutely necessary thing to do. It's critical that you maintain interests or pursue interests that you enjoy. It's critical that you try to keep your relationship with your partner or your spouse strong. It's critical that you find support among other parents and families of children with disabilities in the community, so you can share resources, commiserate with each other, share the joys, maybe do shared activities, but to avoid the social isolation that can come with having a child with disabilities if you don't make the conscious effort to reach out. It's also critically important that you reach out for support outside the disabilities community so that you do have a sense of life beyond disabilities. That's a healthy thing for you to do, and it's a healthy thing for your kids to see you do. So, doing self-care, trying to come up with a work-life balance that works may be extremely challenging. I get that, but I would say that should be a very, very high priority on your list. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is maybe reiterating a few points that have already been made. Some tips would be, to take care of you first. If you don't take care of yourself, you eventually will get sick physically or mentally, and you'll burn out and you won't be able to provide care for your child. Work at taking care of your partner and all your family members in addition to your child with disabilities, and try to strike a balance where everyone is treated as equally as possible, even given the special needs that you have with one child. Keys are communication, cooperation, collaboration, how you work out division of responsibilities and how you work out work-life balance for yourself is really, really critical. The suggestion that you focus on your child's strengths and abilities, not just on their disabilities, so that you maintain a positive, joyful approach to the wonders really of your unique child. Celebrate any and all progress. Help teach your child, and you'll have to learn this too, self-advocacy, empowerment, self-sufficiency, and independence. And do surround yourself with supportive people. Remember, it's a lifelong journey. Okay, next slide, please. So we have some resources listed here, and I will just say that preparing for this, as I mentioned, we can only hit the tips of the waves in a 45-minute webinar. So there's an awful lot of things we're not covering, and any of the topic slides, could have warranted a full hour discussion probably. So we've just listed some resources here. This is not by any means a full list. I do have Community Access's number listed there. The Division of Developmental Disabilities, which was just recommended moments ago by one of our participants. The phone number is there for a range of support services. The New Jersey Department of Education, Office of Special Education phone number is there. Perform Care, which is the Children's System of Care I mentioned earlier. The Adult Division of Disability Services number is there. There is a Union County. Yes, you can. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name or whether it's a Miss or Mister. There is a Union County Office for persons with disabilities and special needs, which plans activities, recreational programs, art programs, all kinds of wonderful services. For housing resources, you can contact the New Jersey Housing Resource Center, which has information on housing resources. Disability Rights New Jersey exists as a legal and advocacy framework for you as parents to make sure that your rights and your child's rights under the various federal and state laws and departments are being delivered. So that's that's a number you can put in your back pocket in case you have issues. I've listed here the special needs trust number at DMAHS, the Beneficiary Administrative Action Unit. I will apologize for not having more resources listed right here. In the process of preparing for this, I got a little bit of a taste for how much is out there and how complex it is. And I do see DVRS listed, Division of Vocational Resources. If we don't have it in the additional resource sheet that Ria's going to share. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay, thank you, Ria, for getting that up there. And I'm sorry, I'm just jumping around in chats here. Daryl, thank you. Support group and respite of some sort is important. It's important to take advantage of these support groups and resources. I do have, I think, if it's not in the list we just posted, that Ria just posted, I'm happy to send out an additional list of resources that that I can share with you. I would just ask if you have an interest in getting information or in any kind of a follow-up program, if you could, I guess, leave your contact information in the chat, and we can follow up with you, make sure you get the information and any announcements on any further webinar topics that we do. I know we've kind of raced through a lot of information, some of it detailed, some of it just kind of pointers, but we do have some time here for questions or discussion. So this is the time, if you have questions or if you have experiences you'd like to share, or if you have any other resource tips, we would welcome any of those.
Hey, well, thank you, Bill. We don't see anybody responding, but I want to thank everyone that came on. We lost Dr. Darrell Hill, who's a physician. He's one of my sons that I helped raise. He's in Maryland, so I'm just appreciative that he came on. But everyone that's come on. So someone just put another good resource in. And I would add that if you are thinking this is has been worthwhile, you can put in the chat that you would like to have it again at a later date, or you can just, and also talk directly to Bill Webb, as well as Walter. Walter has been very, very involved long term in working with families with disabilities. So he's a person that is a walking resource. And so I want to just thank everyone, thank the team. Once again, thank you, Bill. And I'm not going to hold any of you up anymore, but thank you for coming on. And Spearman Consultings will be having additional workshops and training. And have a blessed holiday, whatever holiday you celebrate during this time of the year. Have a blessed and great one. And once again, thank Bill, thank Ria and Angela, and all of you that came on, and have a great evening.